The principles of South-South cooperation are inspired by those mentioned in 1955 during the first Africa-Asia Summit at Bandung and evolved over time. The spirit of South-South initiative had been motivated against unequal world order which was created by the first British imperialism since 18th century and later by American imperialism since the Second World War. However, academicians, policymakers and practitioners from the South could not arrive at any agreed configuration for development model so far. Some kinds of consensus attain that development for the South should not follow a path that is a replication of the development paradigm in the developed North, which was based on the cost of others. The industrialization and developmental size, nature and character of socio-economic, political and cultural habits, priorities and sectors-wise transitions are diversified in the South's development models. Mix of the state and the market or openness and intervention that differed across countries and changed over time in terms of development models which range from a strong reliance on markets and openness such as in Argentina, Chile, Mexico, South Africa, Malaysia, Thailand and Indonesia and India, including India, through state support with moderated openness, Brazil, Egypt and Turkey, or a strategic intervention and a calibrated openness, South Korea and Taiwan, to a state intervention and controlled openness, China. We can see in this context, development cooperation models among South countries need to be adapted and developed as per local conditions. From the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, particularly in Britain, to till date, the colonial masters always strained to integrate the world, including Asian and African countries, to exploit their vast natural resources and cheap labor power for the purpose of manufacturing industrial requirements and finally export manufactured goods to their markets. These manufacturing units, approximately 5,000, is called outsourcing industries, shifted to the southern countries including India, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and through creating a mechanism of financial institutions for currencies dollar and euro domination to ensure profits maximization. While since the World War II, the most developing countries shadowed a separate development path for development through disintegrating the world. Southern countries lead the non-aligned movement and the Soviet-led socialist bloc combined forces were contradicting with the US-led economic and military blocs. In the absence of prior consensus, which is a prerequisite of theory building, left development to be experimentally evolved through trials and errors, and the development trajectory in the South became varied and multi-directional. The local conditions very much determined the varied trajectory of development in different societies. Malaysia would not like to choose the path or way of development like more open Singapore, or India would not stride the same whatever China done, or Ivory Coast would not like the same as Mexico did. There are many different yardsticks. So South's policy makers face these different variants and dimensions. How to go about standardizing the highly differentiated phenomenon of South-South cooperation? What are the standards? What are the stakes? Should it be growth only? Should it be development in a special sense? Should it be egalitarian development? To capacity building, human resource development and strengthening connectivity, executing mutually beneficial projects in sectors including infrastructure, energy, power transmissions, there are still unanswered questions in terms of what kind of knowledge, what kind of technology, what kind of techniques would contribute to South-South cooperation visions of development cooperation. The major developments in South-South cooperation and progress made in the implementation of the Havana, Buenos Aires, Jakarta plans of action and the new development strategy of Nairobi outcome documents. The 48th anniversary of Buenos Aires conference is going to be held in 2018 could thus be an opportune moment for the international community to take a stock of what has been achieved to date and decide how to take advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead in implementing the 2030s agenda for sustainable development can still be maximized as said in Addis Ababa conference in 2015. 1949, the United Economic and Social Council established the first UN Technical Aid Program. In 1955, newly independent African and Asian states meet in Bandung, Indonesia and decide to work together at the UN as the Afro-Asian Group. In 1964, establishment of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. At the first UNCTAD, Latin American country joined with African and Asian country to create Group of 77. In 1972, the United Nations General Assembly creates a working group on technical cooperation among developing countries. In 1974, the General Assembly, in its resolution A/3251, endorsed the establishment of a special unit within the United Nations Development Programme to promote technical cooperation among developing countries. In 1978, a conference of the Global South on TCDC, technical cooperation among developing countries, is held in Buenos Aires, resulting in the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing TCDC. In 1980, the countries participating in UNDP become established as a high-level committee of the General Assembly that would meet every 2 years to monitor the implementation of BAPA. It's what it called. In 2001, the third United Nations Conference on the least developed countries held in Brussels in May 2001 emphasized the importance of South-South cooperation in capacity building and setting best practices, particularly in the areas of health, education, training, environment, science and technology, trade, investment and transport cooperation. In 2002, the International Conference on Financing for Development held in Monterrey, Mexico in March 2002 specifically encouraged South-South cooperation, including through triangular cooperation to facilitate exchange of view on successful strategy, practices and experience and replication of projects. In 2002, the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg, South Africa in August 2002 adopts a declaration and an implementation plan that endorsed South-South cooperation and a strong regional and sub-regional action. In 2003, the UN General Assembly, in its resolution number 58 by 220, decides to create 19 September as the United Nations Day for South-South cooperation. In 2004, the Special Unit for TCDC had a new name, the Special Unit for South-South Cooperation, that reflects the increased importance and expanded focus of cooperation among developing countries. In 2005, the heads of state and government that gathered at the World Summit at New York from 14 to 16 September in 2005 recognized the achievements and great potential of South-South cooperation and encourage the promotion of such cooperation. They also encourage the international community, including the international financial institutions, to support the efforts of developing countries inter alia through triangular cooperation. In 2009, the high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation is held in Nairobi, Kenya. Participants produced the Nairobi Outcome document highlighting the roles that national government, regional entities and United Nations agency are to play in supporting and implementing South-South and triangular cooperation. In 2011, the United Nations General Assembly decided that beginning in 2012, the observance of the United Nations Day for South-South cooperation would be changed from 19th December to 12th December to mark the day in 1978 when the UN Conference on Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries adopted the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. In 2012, the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation holds its 17th sessions at United Nations headquarters in New York from 22 to 25th May in 2012 to review the progress made in implementing the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, the new directions strategy for South-South cooperation, and the Nairobi Outcome document of the High-Level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation. In 2014, the Executive Board of the United Nations Development Programme, the United Nations Population Fund, and the United Nations Office for Project Services at its annual session 2014 takes note of and approves the strategic framework of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation in 2014 to 2017. The South had since its inception been growing in solidarity within the South-South cooperation framework, upholding the normative values, which included inclusive and sustainable development, social justice and freedom, deep people's democracy from the top to bottom levels, and equitable and fair world order. These main objectives of South-South cooperation we have seen historically several events organized by the United Nations. The aggregate development assistance level of developed countries for the South are at least, for example, 1/4 only, then 3/4 of their historical commitments and even public debts, which is provided by the World Bank and the IMF, are only 40% of the South's requirements. Southern exports to other countries of the South now accounts for more than 50% of the exports of most developing regions and also for most large developing countries, while such exports remain concentrated within region as intra-regional exports are much greater than inter-regional exports. There has been significant diversification as the share of intra-regional exports has declined in all regions. Most regions have increased their exports to Asia the fastest. Compared to 7.8% of global trade in 1990, South-South trade in 2014 comprised about 25%. South-South trade rose from 1/5 to approximately 1/4 of world trade about equal to North-North trade. Since then, it was remained at $5 trillion as North-South trade grew to 40% of world trade by 2013. The share of 48 least developed countries in world exports increased over the same period from 0.5% to 1.1%. Asia and Latin America were most responsible for the doubling in the value of world commercial services exports over the last decade. In 2014, it reached an unprecedented $4.9 trillion. The most recent estimate of the value of annual South-South cooperation for development is $20 billion. That figure does not capture the importance of South-South collective negotiation and knowledge-sharing activities. In Africa, unprecedented intra-regional trade and investment flow reflect the emergence of patterns of growth driven by domestic consumption and structural reforms. In Asia, important structural and infrastructural initiatives are opening up enormous potential in the region. The foreign direct investment flow into the South reached a new high of $741 billion in 2015. And developing Asia remained the world's largest recipient, a region with over $500 billion. Emerging economies generated a record 36% of global investment outflows in 2014, up from 12% in 2007. Over half of foreign direct investment outflows from developing countries in 2013 to 2014 were in equity, usually associated with greenfield investment, and much of it was intensifying South-South economic relationships. That included developing countries' corporations acquiring the assets of developed country, multinational enterprises in South, investing almost $500 billion abroad in 2014, a 30% increase from the previous year. Chinese, Indian and United Arab Emirates firms continue to be notable investors in Africa. The rise of these southern investors has been a new factor underpinning foreign direct investment flow into Africa in recent years. In terms of annual flow, Chinese foreign direct investment to Africa in 2013 to 14 was reportedly 4.4% of the total. Meanwhile, greenfield investment in African manufacturing and services are increasing from China, India and South Africa to meet the rising local demand from a growing middle class. Chinese foreign direct investment to Africa also reflects the effort of manufacturing companies to shift production to lower wage countries. South-South cooperation is largely financed from developing countries' resources through various mechanisms, deepen South-South financial interactions, including currency exchange and new banks. Currency exchange arrangements since 2013 include China, Brazil, Republic of Korea, Malaysia, Republic of Korea, United Arab Emirates, and Republic of Korea, Indonesia. The Chiang Mai initiative of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, China, Japan and Korea, in the wake of the Asian financial crisis of 1997, it now doubled its initial $120 billion. India has listed 23 potential currency exchange partners. Now, the South-South initiative, whatever South had capacity to do more things, to achieve more goals and objectives, still remain. So other regional organizations like Brics initiatives recently had emerged, especially since 2001. Brics initiative, Brics cooperation evolved. Now, towards multipolarity, BRICS has taken an active part in prompting reform of the international financial system and improvement of prevailing procedures and mechanisms for making policy for international financial institutions, and is working energetically to strengthen the rights of developing nations to be represented and heard. Asia needs around $8 trillion in investment by 2020 to improve the region's bettered infrastructure or face slowing economic growth, but World Bank and IMF and Asian Development have been failed to provide even 40% of as per their requirements. BRICS aims at contributing significantly to the development of humanity, establishing a more equitable and fair world and strengthening South-South cooperation. Today, BRICS encompass over 26% of the world land coverage, 44% of the world's population, 28% share to global gross domestic product, 24.4% sharing in gas production in the world, 36.3% share in gold reserve, 40.2% share in traditional energy production, 20.7% share in oil production, 32% share in agricultural land area, 50% contribution to the world economy, 10.8% share in defense sector. BRICS hold a combined GDP on the basis of PPP, purchasing power parity, of $18.486 trillion and 20% share to global trade. So BRICS exports amounted $3.48 trillion in 2014. Imports in that same year amounted to $3.03 trillion. Since 2001, the BRICS have more than doubled their share of world exports. In that year, the group represented 8.1% of world's total exports. In 2015, they accounted for 19.1% of that total. Between 2006 and 2015, intra-BRICS trade increased 163% from $93 billion to $244 billion. In the same period, Brazil's export to other BRICS countries increased 202% from 14.25 to $43.05 billion. Imports have increased by 249% from $10.84 billion to $37.87 billion. In 2015, Brazil recorded a positive trade balance of $5.1 billion with the BRICS. BRICS countries hold $3.93 trillion of foreign reserve currency, more than one-third of the global reserve. Between 2002 to 2012, intra-BRICS trade increased 922%. The stock has slipped 4.41% so far in the calendar year 2016. Now we can see, we have figure, in the figure we can see here BRICS pattern of trade, ratio of trade or GDP, BRICS economic performance in terms of GDP. We can see here there are vast potential in the areas of aerospace, agro processing, auto and auto components, chemicals, green energy and renewable, healthcare and pharmaceuticals, railways, textiles and apparel, infrastructure, IT, engineering goods, tourism, games and jewelry, and skill development, where BRICS nations can collaborate, can play important role The overall BRICS focus of development cooperation on regional integration and technical assistance with various regional groups in Latin America, ASEAN and Asia Pacific regions in Asia and in African countries. Trade and the current foreign direct investment inflow into BRICS are extremely complex. Currently, domestic investment ratio are around 40% in BRICS. In China and India, investment ratio are 30% of GDP respectively, while Brazil, Russia and South Africa accounted approximately 20% to 23% of their GDP. The world economic crisis and growth of China show a decreasing trend. The leadership of countries looking for a long-time anti-crisis strategy see the Silk Road economic belt as a serious beginning in that direction. After the announcement of the economic belt by the Chinese President Xi Jinping in September 2013, China's efforts for partnership with the Central Asian countries gathered pace. While the President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, has actively supported the idea, the leadership of the other Central Asian countries have also started thinking about mechanisms to participate in the economic belt. Even though China has conducted think tank seminars and conferences in this regard, there are problems and questions that are still to be debated and addressed. Enough attention has not been given to the problem of interest and distribution of benefits from the economic belt among partner countries in the framework of a rising China and its geopolitics. Reasonable points of the view regarding the destinies of regional economic blocs are yet to be found. Even though China will remain the main financial sources of the economic belt development, the political and social consequences of this status of China for countries and partners remain unknown. The question is whether this economic belt will be the new level of regional economic integration or whether it would lead to the disintegration of economic unions in favor of the new alternative to globalization. The 2016 BRICS Summit will be the 8th annual BRICS Summit, an international relations conference attended by the heads of the state or heads of government of the 5 member states Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. The summit will be held in Panaji, Goa in India from 15th to 16th October 2016. South-South cooperation is a crucially important tool for strengthening economic independence. However, progress over the years has not been commensurate with the commitments in the various declarations and programs of action. The lack of effective follow-up has lessened the impact and effectiveness of such cooperation in recent years. The decades-long trend of globalization has largely served to advance the interest of corporations and highly paid professionals, often at the expense of the majority of the low-skilled and unskilled workers. Many of the free trade agreements entered on the cost of contractual, informal and household workers had depressed their wages. Regional blocs such as South-South Cooperation, BRICS and BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation, Eurasian Economic Union can play an important role to achieve the goals like self-reliance, equality, fair and sustainable development through investment, technological transfer, trade and economic cooperation, etc., which ultimately will lead a new world economic order through discouraging dollar and euro domination, through de-dollarization and intensifying regional cooperation. It is possible to remove all types of imperialist dominations such as World Bank and the IMF, which is dominated by the United States and Western countries. So it is possible to change the current world economic order. It is possible to reform international financial institutions to make a new economic order on the basis of fair and equitable. Thank you very much.